First, though, if you like nightclubs, get your glow sticks ready because by the summer, you could be out dancing to this. Thing is, though, if raving isn't necessarily quite your cup of tea, you might be wondering when you and your wee little ones can be back in the great outdoors doing things like this.
Take in.
Okay, how's that?
That's me.
All right, Tom. Climb when you're ready.
Climbing.
Despite pubs and clubs getting a roadmap out of lockdown, there's not been so much as a whisper about when Cumbria's outdoor education centres can reopen. And, unlike in Scotland and Northern Ireland, centres in England have been given no specific funding. Tim Farron is the Liberal Democrat MP for Westmoreland and Lonsdale, and he's been campaigning for the sector. He joins us now. Tim Farron, good morning to you. These centres, they offer learning and accommodation to prevent a stop-start reopening. Isn't it right that the government takes its time on this one to make sure that once they open, they stay open?
Well, yes, good morning. I think the real problem with the outdoor education sector is that the government seems to have overlooked it now for 12 months. It's a small sector compared to mainstream schools, but we think across the country there's 15,000 people who work in it, hundreds of them here, of course, in Cumbria. So 15,000 people who work in it, although that's not the case now. We think 6,000 of those 15,000 have lost their jobs now. And that's because the government hasn't, as you say, intervened to provide finance to support those centres in a specialist package like they have in Northern Ireland and in Scotland. But also they've not provided any clarity, as you rightly pointed out in your very good introduction. Nightclubs now have got a date when they know they can open, and outdoor education centres haven't. And that matters because you perhaps don't need 3 months' notice to go to a nightclub, but schools do need a period of time of notice to know when they're going to book an outdoor education trip. And because of that lack of clarity, and the government has failed to give it despite having plenty of opportunities over the last few months, that means that we're seeing outdoor education centres losing staff, and some of them will even close.
Well, let's just touch on a point you've made there, because we're at a time when schools, they are up to their eyeballs. They themselves have just managed to reopen safely. Would teachers really have time to think about booking outdoor educational trips when they're just trying to get their classrooms sorted?
Oh, yes. I mean, talking to head teachers, that lots of them have penciled in bookings at outdoor education centres, some of them day trips and some of them residentials. And the reality is that, it is an enormous benefit. It's not a kind of nice add-on kind of luxury. Outdoor education is a really important part of people's learning. Those of us who've got to experience a bit ourselves when we were children will recall maybe uncomfortable weeks, but nevertheless weeks that at the end of it we were better, stronger people who knew more about ourselves, people who were more confident. And the thing that is most frustrating about the government's failure to address this problem in the last several months now is that outdoor education doesn't just need saving, it needs deploying at a time like this. You've got young people, many of them, in a situation now where they've perhaps fallen out of love with learning. Maybe there's mental health issues, disconnect with what it is to be a student. This is exactly the set of talents and skills that you would want to deploy now to help those young people get back in touch with learning. And so one of the things I'm calling for is for the government to fund our outdoor education centres, to have their staff to come into school, into mainstream settings, and just to help reconnect young people with that love of learning so that we can make up for some of the losses of the last 12 months.
OK, Tim Farron, thank you. Tim Farron is the Liberal Democrat MP for Westmoreland and Lonsdale. After 8 o'clock, we'll be hearing from a Cumbrian outdoor centre that's already had to make half of its workforce redundant after not being able to open to children for almost a year now. The government told us it's kept its guidance on residential and non-residential visits under review, in line with advice from Public Health England, and will review the current advice when it's safe to do so. Cumbria's outdoor education centres during the coronavirus crisis, but despite the damage that's already been done, they still have no idea when they'll be allowed to reopen as lockdown eases. Meanwhile, schools are already back, and the hospitality industry has been given its roadmap out of lockdown. Speaking to me earlier, Tim Farron, the Liberal Democrat MP for Westmoreland and Lonsdale, says this uncertainty is damaging an important sector.
Nightclubs now have got a date when they know they can open, and outdoor education centres haven't. And that matters because, you perhaps don't need 3 months' notice to go to a nightclub, but schools do need a period of time of notice to know when they're going to book an outdoor education trip. And because of that lack of clarity, and the government has failed to give it despite having plenty of opportunities over the last few months, that means that we're seeing outdoor education centres losing staff, and some of them will even close.
It's causing frustration for many in the industry. Even day visits to these centres aren't currently permitted, and, well, as you can imagine, the businesses running them, they're really feeling the pinch. Tim Taylor is the centre manager at Patterdale Hall, an outdoor education centre in Glenridding. Tim, good morning. How's your centre been affected financially and indeed staffing-wise during the pandemic?
Well, good morning, Mike. Yes, we're an outdoor centre owned by Bolton School in Lancashire, a large independent school, who have been able to support us and are committed to outdoor education for the future. But we have been losing over £10,000 a month throughout the pandemic. And we've also, obviously, back last year as the JRS furlough scheme was pulling away, like many other centres, had to look at our staffing team and think what sort of team we might need for the future with the unknown certainty on when we could open up again. So we have actually dropped 6 of our staff team, who we would hope to pick back up again when we have a view to when our core business, our schools business, is going to come back. But at the moment, we just don't know.
You say you're owned by this school in Bolton who've been able to absorb the losses thus far. Being owned by the school, Tim, does that mean that you're not needing to tout for business for when you can reopen, whenever that might be?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I mean, we work with Bolton Schools 60% of our time, and then the rest of our time we work with lots of other schools from Cumbria, schools from the wider northwest. And like many, there's many different outdoor centres in Cumbria. Some are owned by local authorities from the whole of the north of kind of England who have their outdoor centres within Cumbria because it's such a superb location. There are charities with operational reserves, maybe a year's worth of turnover, and then there are obviously social enterprises and private businesses, and all have suffered in different ways. And we are very lucky to have had that financial support. Charities who have been well prepared for a kind of future issues have managed to have a year's worth of operational kind of reserves, but those are all dwindling now, and we need to be on that roadmap, like the rest of the sectors are, to know when we can operate again.
Well, the government says it will announce a date when residential visits can resume, when it's safe to do so.
Yeah, well, we've seen hotels and hostels on the roadmap for the 17th of May. We've got a general indication that the economy should open back up again by the 21st of June. We hope that the Department for Education, who seem to have been slowing down the kind of review, are reviewing it now, and we hope for an opening on the 17th of May. But we just don't know. And as Tim Farron very eloquently put, it takes time for schools to plan their residentials. I have schools who are desperate to come to us and will respond as quickly as they possibly can, but they still have to gather consents, gather money off parents, plan their visits. And then we also have schools who are thinking, well, actually, it's a bit late now, so let's cancel our summer bookings and we'll look to plan for next year. But that type of action won't help the sector be buoyant next year. We need business as soon as possible to be able to trade our way out of this big hole that we're in.
Some listening to this might well sympathise with everything that you're saying, Tim, but they might also say, well, at the moment schools have more than enough on their plates. They're literally getting the kids back into the classroom to start doing the academic learning as we speak. Therefore, thinking about a trip to outdoor education centres, they can't possibly do that. Why are those trips, in your view, so important?
Well, Mike, I think we spend so long looking at the value of things sometimes. Also looking at the cost of things. We forget to look at the value of them. The outdoor education experiences are absolutely critical for young people's developments, to develop those characters, those characteristics that they need to succeed. That self-confidence, that idea of working in a team, of exposing them to new and different challenges, of engaging them in their natural environment, so that they get to build up a love and appreciation of nature, of the Lake District of Cumbria. So schools are telling us that they want to come. Schools are telling us that they will prioritise this. This is part of the catch-up curriculum. This is part of the recovery for young people. They just need to know when they can do that. And we have had a fantastic schedule of day visits from schools, and those are currently not able to operate. We're only asking to work with schools in their established bubbles. We can put in all the mitigation for COVID-safe working practices, but they need the guidance from the Department for Education to change so that they can make the choice.
OK, thank you, Tim, for being on. That's Tim Taylor from the Patterdale Hall Outdoor Education Centre. In a statement, the government told BBC Radio Cumbria it's kept its guidance on both residential and non-residential visits under review, in line with Public Health England advice. It says it's taken action to protect lives and livelihoods, including the extension of the furlough scheme and wider support for businesses to continue to support jobs. It says it'll review the current advice on residential visits when it's safe to do so.
Mike Zeller at breakfast.